before we get into this, okay, that little bit was the plane flying out over the Atlantic on the way to Brussels. But it occurs to me that there was an event prior to this, and I don't have any film footage of it just because it would be way too weird to film on an airplane. But I feel this should be told. The story should be told. I flew from Minneapolis, St. Paul to Washington Dulles Airport, and then I went from Washington Dulles to Brussels, and then from Brussels to Copenhagen, and that was my journey to Denmark. I don't like flying, and it's not that I'm terrified that the plane's going to crash, because if that happens, it happens, I don't worry about it. I hate being confined, and I hate being around people who I don't know for extended periods of time. So I get on the plane in Minneapolis, and we're going to Washington, D.C. There was a bunch of issues I'm not going to get into about the flight arrangements and stupid airline people who couldn't find my reservations even though I had them, and they kept telling me to go back and forth and blah, 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 blah. It was very annoying, so I was stressed out. I did eventually get on the plane. I got my seat, and they put me in the emergency exit row. And they have to ask you, can you help, assist people get off the plane if there's an accident, blah, blah, blah. The reason why I like sitting there is because you get a lot of extra leg room. And being that I'm 6'2", I'm kind of tall. I hate being crunched in the plane. Emergency exit aisle is great. So I get in there, I sit down. We're about 3 minutes to leave, and there's nobody sitting next to me. So I've got the leg room. No one's next to me. This is going to be an awesome flight to Washington, D.C. But at the last minute, a woman comes on board. And this is where I wish I would have taken a picture, but it'd just be weird. She was bruised all down the side of her face. I mean, she had black eyes on both eyes, and she was bruised. So somebody had beat her ass, basically. She weighed probably 75 pounds. She was very skinny. Her clothes were dirty, and she proceeds to sit next to me. Great. So I lay my head, because I'm in the window seat, against the wall, and I just close my eyes because I figure I'll just sleep or pretend to sleep. I won't have to engage with this person. Obviously, she's having a hard row of it. Life's not treating her very well. I feel bad, but I don't want to get into your stuff because I've got a long day of travel ahead of me, and I can't be bothered. So the plane takes off, and she's like doing a crossword puzzle or something, and she writes on there in I've got bad handwriting, but this was ridiculous. It said something like, "Hi, my name is Anna. Let me know if you need anything," and she shoves it in front of my face. And again, I don't want to engage with her, so I just give her a thumbs up and then, wave it away. Fine. So we're flying for a little bit, and she starts, I don't know if she's doped up or has a severe concussion or what's going on, but she starts laying her head on my shoulder. So I push her away. She does it again. I push her away. And then finally I'm like, "Look, don't touch me, please." And she's like, she's like out of her mind. Eventually she falls over to her other side, and she's like laying out in the aisle, and her feet are splayed out. And I don't know, she's obviously on drugs or, like I said, concussed severely because she has this bruising over her face. I'll see if I can find a picture and include that in here. It's something that's similar to what I was dealing with. But so finally she falls asleep. Awesome. But then the stewardess comes, they're doing the beverage service thing. And this is about 35 minutes into the flight. The stewardess comes by, and her legs are out in the aisle. They can't get the cart by, so she's trying to wake her up, and she won't wake her up. And I'm like, just push her legs in and don't wake her up. But then eventually they realize she's not responsive, so they go to the front. They say, is there a medical professional on board? Some nice lady who I assume was a nurse or a doctor does come up front, and they bring her back there, and then they try to get her to respond, and she's not really communicating with them. She takes her pulse and stuff, but now she's awake again. Thanks. So she starts flailing around, and she's like crawling on me. She's like grabbing my arm and trying to cuddle with me and all this weird shit. And I'm like, get off, get off. Finally, I stand up, and I'm just standing in the alley. You know, like everyone in the plane around us is looking at me, and I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to be noticed. I'm furious right now, but you can't get angry and freak out on an airplane because you'll end up in jail or having the plane diverted and stuff. So I'm standing in the aisle, and the stewardess comes up, and she's like, what's going on? I was like, you know, this lady is clearly out of her mind, and she's climbing all over me. I don't want to deal with this anymore. And she's like, well, we're having turbulence, so you're going to have to sit down. I was like, I don't feel comfortable sitting next to this clearly disturbed person. I don't know how she even gets let on the plane. That's the thing. How does someone in that state just check in and you're on board? I mean, there should be some sort of vetting process, but that's neither here nor there because she's here and I had to deal with her. So I say to the stewardess, you know, this is the emergency aisle. Do you think she's going to be helpful if there's an emergency? Isn't there some kind of regulation? And then she's like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to have to get her to move. So eventually they get her to move next to the nurse or doctor or whatever she was, much to her joy. And the woman that was sitting there moved to sit next to me, and she was perfectly normal and delightful. It was wonderful. So I sit back down. We get to through the rest of the flight, and we're starting to come into Washington, D.C., and the young lady who's sitting next to me apparently is a very nervous flyer, and it was sort of a turbulent, you know, entrance back into Washington, D.C., and she was quite panicked, freaking out. And I was consoling to her, you know, it's like, and we were sitting over the landing gear, so when the landing gear fell, she was like, ah, what was that? I said, just the landing gear coming down, don't worry, we're fine, we're just, you know, a little turbulent, but we'll be on the ground in no time. Talked her through, we got through, and she's like, after we landed and we're taxiing, and she's like, I'm sorry, I was so weird. I was like, you know what, after what I dealt with in the first half of this flight, I could take your weirdness for hours. It was not a problem, thanks. So that was my flight from Minneapolis to Washington, D.C. Fortunately, no other flight was that interesting, shall we say. But now we'll move on to Denmark. And I don't have a whole lot for the rest of day one. I'm going to include, I was trying to film because there was like a full moon over the Atlantic once we were further along. That was quite lovely. I don't think I really captured that. And then we'll have just a lot of nonsense of, you know, me shooting video out of a car, which really isn't that interesting, but it seems like it's 90% of what I recorded because, well, we did spend a lot of time in the car. And yeah, so that's it. That was the flight. Interesting stuff. And I guess the worst was at the very beginning, just to, you know, make everything else seem wonderful after that. I don't know. Lesson learned. But I feel bad for that lady. Clearly she's having problems, but I just didn't want her inflicting them on me at the time, if that makes sense. All right, let's get into it. All right, so I'm officially in Denmark, and we'll get into the travel because it was a long, hectic, horrible travel day, but I'm with Christian. I'll show him in a moment. I just wanted you to know that I asked him to take me somewhere, you know, somewhat secluded, a little private, so we could just have a leisurely walk, and this is where he brought me.
I don't know, I mean, they weren't here 2 days ago, so...
It was like a private beach.